bypass of IPS and IDS systems with Nmap. So what is IPS and IDS? With the development of network systems, security problems have arisen exponentially. The network system can attack the computers. Unauthorized persons may attempt to access computers. The outgoing packets over the network can be viewed by third parties and saved and viewed on their own computer. Critical systems running over the network can then be rendered inoperable and face many security problems. That's why they're called vulnerabilities. So in order to prevent these security problems, systems that constantly monitor the network and prevent future attacks are deployed. So these such systems are called IPS, or Intrusion Prevention Systems, and IDS, or Intrusion Detection Systems. So today, there are many very advanced IPS and IDS systems. With the development of the Internet and these computer systems, many types of attacks can be conducted over a network. Therefore, IPS and IDS systems are used in just about every network system. Okay, so how can we scan that with Nmap? How can I scan without getting caught within an IPS and IDS system? I'm glad you asked. It's time to learn about that. How to bypass IPS and IDS systems. Now, there are actually many ways to circumvent IPS and IDS systems when scanning with Nmap. And I'll list some of them. Timing, the most basic detection method of IPS and IDS systems. Blocked if one rope on the network attempts to access multiple ropes and scans on all ports. So in this case, all you need to do is scan individual threads and ports. And then don't access more than one IP and one port at the same time. So in other words, you'll disable parallel scanning. So to do this, it's necessary to scan with Nmap in either T0 or T1 mode. But do remember that T0 and T1 will take a much longer time to scan. Source port. So another method is to scan packets directly through a port with Nmap. We can make Nmap act as an HTTP service. Many IPS and IDS systems allow packets sent through port 80 to pass through. But Nmap must be used with the source port parameter. So let's do an example. Turn on virtual machines that we have installed. Open VirtualBox, open Kali Linux 10.0.2.15, open Ubuntu 10.0.2.7, open Windows 7 10.0.2.6, log into Kali Linux VMs, username root, password tour, and open terminal, and then write this command. Nmap 10.0.2.6, source port 80, press enter, and there are your scan results. Randomized scanning order. So another method is to randomly select the hosts to be scanned. Nmap will scan the threads in sequence when used in default or normal scanning. So in this case, the safety systems may interfere with the thread on which Nmap is installed. So in order to prevent this, we can provide random selection of strings to be scanned with Nmap. So for random scanning, we can use the randomize host parameter with Nmap. And I'll give you that example. If you turn on the virtual machines we have installed, open VirtualBox, open Kali Linux 10.0.2.15, open Ubuntu 10.0.2.7, open Windows 7 10.0.2.6, open Metasploitable 10.0.2.4, and log into Kali Linux VMs. Username root, password tour, open terminal, and write this command. Nmap 10.0.2.0/24 randomize hosts, press enter, and the scan results follow. So as you can see, it didn't scan in any order. It randomly scanned all of the IP addresses. MAC address spoofing. So another method of bypassing firewall restrictions when port scanning is to emulate the MAC address of another computer. This technique can be very effective, especially if there is a MAC filtering rule that only allows traffic from certain MAC addresses. So you will need to discover which MAC address you need to set in order to get the correct results. So specifically, the spoof MAC option allows you to select a MAC address from a specific vendor, select a random MAC address, or set a specific MAC address of your choice. Another advantage of MAC address fraud is that you make your browsing more confidential because your actual MAC address does not appear in the firewall log files. Command: specify MAC address from a vendor, Nmap, spoof MAC, Dell, /Apple, /3com, IP target. Generate a random MAC address, Nmap, spoof MAC, 0 IP target. Specify your own MAC address, Nmap, spoof MAC, 0A0027000006 IP target. And here's an example. Turn on the virtual machines that we have installed. Open VirtualBox. Open Kali Linux 10.0.2.15. Open Metasploitable 10.0.2.4. Log into Kali Linux VMs, username root, password tour, and open terminal. And then write this command: nmap stpn spoof mac 3com 10.0.2.4. Press enter. And the scan results follow. So Nmap generated the MAC address of 3com and scanned it using this MAC address. Now, to change the IPv4 lifetime, or MTU value, in sent packets, so Nmap gives the user the option to set a specific MTU, which is the maximum transmission unit, to the package. So it's similar to the packet fragmentation technique. During scanning, Nmap will create packets based on the number of MTUs we provide. For example, if we set the MTU to 16, Nmap will generate packets of 16 bytes and cause confusion on the firewall. Now, please note, though, that the MTU value must be a multiple of 8. So 8, 16, 24, 32, etc. So here's an example. Turn on the virtual machines we have installed. Open VirtualBox. Open Kali Linux 10.0.2.15. Open Ubuntu 10.0.2.7. Log into Kali Linux VMs, username root, password tour. Open terminal, and write this command: nmap mtu 16 10.0.2.7. Press enter. And the scan results follow. Send bad checksums is another way to circumvent security systems. Send incorrect checksum packets. Now, many security systems ignore faulty packets, especially due to performance problems. So by taking advantage of this incorrect behavior, we may be able to send incorrect checksum packets with Nmap. And you can use the Nmap bad sum target command to send packets to destinations that have failed checksum packets. So I'll show you an example. Turn on the virtual machines we have installed. Open VirtualBox, open Kali Linux 10.0.2.15. Open Ubuntu 10.0.2.7. Log into Kali Linux VMs. Username root, password tour. Open terminal, and write this command: nmap bad sum 10.0.2.7, press enter, and there are the scan results. Fragmentation. So yet another method is to shred the sent packets into smaller packets. To do this, we can use the F parameter in Nmap. For example, if you turn on the virtual machines we have installed, open VirtualBox, open Kali Linux 10.0.2.15, open Ubuntu 10.0.2.7, log into Kali Linux VMs, username root, password tour, open terminal, and write this command, nmap f 10.0.2.7, press enter, and there are your scan results.